Hey everyone, welcome back to Grappling with Life episode 4. Today I'm joined by one of my friends, Randall.
Hi, I'm Randall Dibble. I agreed to join Nathan here on this podcast because I really love grappling and wrestling and was interested in chatting about it.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on. Could you maybe tell me or tell the audience a bit about what got you into wrestling and jiu-jitsu and what got you hooked?
So, wrestling, my older brother was a wrestler. He's 8 years older than me, so I was a little kid when he started wrestling. Uh, Looked up to him, and so I wanted to wrestle. And at the same time, as a little kid, my best friend's dad was one of the assistant coaches on the high school team. So I had a couple things pulling me that direction, and got interested in it because of that. School I went to was it's a relatively small rural school, but we were really good at wrestling. You know, made the state meet as a team a couple times, and so it was relatively kind of natural for me to fall into it. As far as jujitsu specifically, I didn't even know what jujitsu was when I finished high school, and then one day my wife had started a new job, and she was telling me that one of the people she worked with went to a jujitsu gym. Turns out he actually owned the jujitsu gym. I didn't know that, but there was like a loss in communication there, and then so I showed up at a jujitsu gym. It's funny. I was actually even looking for judo at the time because I was a wrestling coach for years, and when I wrestled, I was not a good thrower. Like I wasn't good at like throwing people. And to be a better coach, I was actually looking for, hey, where can I learn to not just like theoretically understand throws, but like practice them? And honestly, I'm lucky I ended up finding jujitsu over judo anyway. And this is nothing like negative about judo, but the 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 higher posture in judo lends itself to be a less of a crossover with wrestling on the throws because if I was teaching Greco-Roman or it'd be a different story, but I was coaching folk style or specifically American folk style, and the lower posture means like the things like the foot sweeps from judo just really aren't present because the higher posture is required. So anyway, it worked out, and I love grappling. So yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. And can you tell me a bit about, you mentioned you started as a kid. What's kind of like the grappling culture or wrestling culture in America for people kind of more based in Australia that don't have that growing up?
Um, Hard to say as someone who didn't grow up in Australia. I can speak a little bit more to like some other people I know that aren't from the American Midwest, where um, for people who aren't American, most, and this isn't even close to all, but most of the best wrestling in the U.S. is like the Northeast, PA, and the Midwest, and then California has excellent wrestling as well. But there's exceptions for sure. There's dudes who come from plenty of places, but it's just more prevalent there than it is in the South. But again, like, good wrestlers come out of the South as well. Just so anyway, the only cultural difference I can think of is it's in schools. So regardless of your financial background or whatever, is going on with their kid, you have opportunity in the U.S. for it. So that's really nice, honestly. If it was never in schools, I doubt I would have ever done wrestling. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you know this, but wrestling basically just doesn't exist in Australia. Like, really, no one even knows what it is. If you talk about wrestling, they'll think you're referring to like the WWE.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
And yeah, but I think America is like extremely kind of wrestling centric. And just
Uh,
wondering,
so not exactly. So if you start comparing wrestling in the United States, like wrestling is one of the three most dominant countries in wrestling for wrestling. The U.S. is one of the three most dominant countries for wrestling. You got Iran, and you've got Russia, and you've got the U.S. And generally, and I mean this is again not always, but generally they're going to be three of the top four in any world in any worlds. You know what I mean? So where they're actually keeping points. Um, I mean, it even happens where they're three of the top three pretty pretty frequently. So they're one of the most wrestling centric cultures in the world, but they're not like I wouldn't say it's overly wrestling centric because like for example, Mongolia competes above its weight, and so does some of the Caucasus countries like Azerbaijan and Georgia, because the U.S. has 335, 350 million people, so we we're a lot of people, relatively wealthy country, lots of opportunity for athletics, so regardless of the fact that it's not like one of the biggest sports in the United States, we're good at it. You know what I mean? Because lots of people, yeah, yeah, as I was saying.
Absolutely. And is it considered like cool in high school to do wrestling, or is it something that most kids are interested in, or what's kind of the distribution or the interest amongst people?
I I don't really know how to answer that. Like, I was an awkward kid. Wasn't really among the people that were very cool. So I think I'm fun now and what have been, but wasn't really that concerned about it being a popular thing. I mean, some of them definitely were, but not everyone. I don't know. It's kind of hard to say.
Hmm. And what was it like for you kind of finding wrestling when you felt that you were maybe a bit awkward or you could grow in confidence? How did that kind of influence your life?
Mm. So I keep thinking these are hard to say because I'm a very scientific person in the way I think, and I don't have counterfactuals. So I assume that it helps, but that's an anecdote and so uh, it. I mean, it definitely helps when I got a lot better at it. So yeah, but that could have just been getting older too. So I'm sorry for the kind of boring answer, but that I don't know was really kind of the truth.
No, that's okay. I appreciate the honesty. I think that's an interesting answer. I guess coming at it differently, then, what is it that you ended up finding so kind of enjoyable about grappling? Is it like the technical aspect then, or
I
improving
think
constantly, or?
I think one of the biggest things for me of why I really enjoy wrestling and grappling when it comes to fitness is uh, I'm a pretty like I'm a thinker. I think all the time. If I go for a run, I can't shut my brain off. If I go lift, I still can't shut my brain off. If I go and I'm wrestling somebody, there is nothing running between my ears except for grappling. You know what I mean? That's it. There's one clearly identifiable problem, and there's no background other stuff occurring. It's just only I am wrestling, I am grappling, and I mean I wear a heart rate monitor sometimes when I grapple, and like there are times where you can look at the zones, and I stayed in zone 5 for 11 straight minutes, and like if I'd done that running or on a like cycling bike, I would feel like I was gonna die. But uh, I was exhausted. No way, no two ways about it. But I didn't really notice it the same way I would if it had been any other activity. I mean, and for people who don't know, Zone 5 is like 90+% of your maximum heart rate, and so you're going as hard as you can possibly go.
Yeah, I think I can relate to both of those ideas. I think firstly, I'm definitely an analytical person. I think a lot, and that made me think what you said about running or lifting weights. And I don't necessarily know that I get the same catharsis or freedom from doing those activities compared to grappling. Grappling, it's like your brain is completely empty and you're just entirely focused on the roll. And secondly, when you talked about being tired, I think that's another excellent point because if you're doing, for example, high intensity interval training, you know that like you're doing it for an
Oh
infinite
yeah,
amount of time until you decide to stop. But when you're grappling, it's kind of like there's the idea that if you are able to keep pushing to the next position, you might actually get the submission or get to a position where you can rest. So I think maybe it's the ambiguity in like the grappling itself that allows you to keep pushing because you're always looking for like kind of a checkpoint or a stop. What do you think?
I mean, I think that's entirely possible. I know that for me, what we just described is true. That I can go harder and just like work out harder than I can do anything else. And is still want to come back the next day, because like that's a huge difference for me. Is like, if I go for and I try to do like the hardest set of sprints I've ever done or something like that, like where I'm just trying to achieve something similar where I'm in zone 5 for like 9 out of 11 minutes. And the other time is in zone 4 where it's like where I've found a checkpoint and I'm working to something and then it spikes back up. I don't want to do it again, but I can go to a grappling workout and lose like 11 pounds, which for metric users is like almost 4 kilos worth of water weight, and be like, all right, I'm going to get hydrated. I have to drink electrolytes and water, a lot of them, and I will come back tomorrow. And that's unique for among all activities for me. And and for grappling and wrestling, which I personally don't have much of a line difference between them. I mean, I mean, I think folk style or American folk style wrestling specifically, I mean, has a ton in common with jujitsu, and to the point where it might even have more in common with jujitsu than it does with freestyle or not freestyle, but Greco. And because like the lack of leg attacks in Greco, the lack of trying to control your opponent and pin them on the bottom, and the parterre style and the international styles is just highly different, where you're focused between gut wrenches, leg locks, not leg locks, sorry, leg laces, and possibly gator rolls, but like at higher levels, everyone knows how to shut down a gator roll. I mean, there's just a lot more controlling the person on the mat in American folk style wrestling.
Absolutely. And do you ever find that you have trouble kind of getting training partners to match that intensity, or what's your approach for kind of ensuring you get a really intense workout?
I mean, yeah, if you can't, if for people watching, if they can't tell, I'm a big person. I weigh about 285 or like 130 kilos. I've wrestled since I was a child. Not not like I'm not like a professional athlete or anything, but I'm good at jiu-jitsu. And so, yeah, training partners can be a problem. I've talked several people into doing, like former wrestlers, into coming to the gym that I train at, but people move, life happens, or none of it's kind of what happens there. And I have a couple of really good training partners, and I'm thankful for that. But yeah, it's definitely a difficult thing to do if you're on the extreme ends of weight, and especially if you're big and skilled. It can be really difficult finding good training partners.
Absolutely. And it sounds like one of your bases or kind of strengths in your game is your cardio and your intensity. So would you say that in some senses you can almost kind of turn or force a match into repeatedly creating high intensity scrambles or positional
I mean,
dilemmas and making it a cardio issue?
you can do that for sure. I mean, one of the things that I try to do, this is really if I'm taking a match that's like a match where it's not so much a bracket. I'll absolutely use cardio as a weapon more. But when it comes to a bracket, I try to get on and of course everyone tries to do this, but I try to, like, if I can get a submission quickly, and if I can't, if I'm getting way ahead, I might conserve some more energy. So there's strategy in it. I much prefer a situation where you have a single match, and the only reason for that is just the impact of your previous matches in jiu-jitsu is a big deal. For in wrestling, they have like a minimum time between matches of like 45 minutes. In jiu-jitsu, you could finish a match, be huffing and puffing, and then literally they're like calling you to your next match. And I that's hard for somebody who uses cardio as a weapon and intensity as a weapon. So it it exists. I wouldn't say it's optimal way to go about it, but it exists.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. Actually had that exact experience at my last competition. I managed to win my first match and I was extremely gassed. And then, because it was only a 3-person bracket, I fought my next one like literally a minute later, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I try to take like pretty extreme accountability around that and tell
Oh yeah,
myself that that's still like my own fault and it's a cardio issue. But yeah, it's tricky and it's hard to take like kind of a holistic view about it.
I wasn't saying that it was like I was like obfuscating responsibility for if I have a bracket and I do poorly because of my cardio. I was just saying that like preference wise. But yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, no, I wasn't implying that you were making that excuse either. I was just saying
Yeah.
conversationally, it's interesting how, there are like so many different factors that go into it. Like it could be random luck, right? It's like,
Yeah, for sure.
does your match happen to be first? Does the person
For sure.
after you happen to get a quick submission? So it's
Yeah,
just kind of crazy, isn't it?
especially in jiu-jitsu, you might have the two best people in the first round. Like in wrestling, most brackets are seated where you'll have the coaches have a meeting and be like, oh well, how good like what this guy do last year, or like what how what's he done this year, and so you'll have a relatively good seating. And jiu-jitsu just at local things it doesn't really have that, but if, the number of different promotions, even like things like an IBJJF may not have it where hey this guy's beat this guy at a Naga, or this guy is not competed specifically in your promotion to win a bunch, and so the seating can get all over the place. Yeah, yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, or there may even be someone sandbagging. I mean, oftentimes you'll see people in smooth comp with like 100 wins at white belt, which in my opinion is kind of excessive. But what's your take on that?
Uh, that's I hadn't really thought about it, but I mean, if someone's got 100 wins, they're probably not a white belt. But um, I, but I have never really thought about this exactly like that. I mean, I don't get the idea of sandbagging too much. Like personally, understand why you'd want to do it too much. Like, yeah, winning is great. Like, you go out there, you try and win every match you have. But I always take the this exact approach, at least mentally, when I compete, and that is, I am not the best dude in the world, bar none. There's no chance that anyone thinks I am. I'm not. So every match I take is just finding out about one. Isn't finding out about if I'm the best guy, because I'm not. It's finding out about if the guy who I is my opponent is in the small group that's better than me or the large group that's worse. And that's how I think about it. So I don't know. Maybe my perspective is a bit odd, but that's the perspective I take to actually manage anxiety a little bit on matches, and also like just how you view it, because you're the best of the guy in your bracket if you win it. You're the best of the guys who showed up if you win it. You're not necessarily the best guy out there unless you're winning, 80cc or something like that.
Yeah, I find that mentality very interesting from you because it's very kind of humble and relaxed, but you have had a lot of competitive success as well. So especially coming from wrestling where there's
Yeah,
a really big kind of competitive culture. So
yeah.
that's quite different from the average competitive mentality. Is that fair to say?
It's mine. I had to intentionally create that because I struggle with anxiety when I compete. Like I have expectations of myself, and so the times I compete, I expect to do well, and so the to manage my own personal feelings, it's what I do, and I tell myself, and yeah, it is. It's the I don't have a problem getting up for matches. I have a problem like hey, let's say like problem's not the right word even, like where the way I need to manage myself is I need to manage myself to be steady level. Let's not go like revved up too much, not too much stress. And so it's approach that works for me. But, yeah.
Okay, interesting. And it sounds as if you became very interested in grappling in quite an expansive way, exploring all of the kind of different disciplines or divisions of grappling. Did you never also become interested in striking, or what was your take on that?
I've done striking a little bit, like training in a gym. I attended a gym that had more of an MMA focus at one point, and I enjoy striking. I'm nowhere near to the same extent as I enjoy grappling. Big part of it for me is what we were talking about earlier. Like when grappling, you can go and you can go get a real workout, and you're not expecting to injure each other. Like, and if people are really hitting each other inside of striking uh, environment, it's a much more difficult to manage like how how beat up you guys get from going hard. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And just touching on that, it sounds like a big focus for you when you kind of participate in martial arts is getting that workout in. Are you kind
Yeah.
of moving to a more health centric focus? And also,
I,
as you've continued to age, how's that kind of changed your training regimen?
I mean, honestly, it's one of the bigger parts of it to me. It's not like the only thing I want to do out of it. Like I want to get better at jujitsu. I'm still working on getting better at jujitsu, but when it's one of the primary methods by which I try to stay healthy and work out, and yeah, and I'll go like do spin class and stuff like that to work that as out well, but it's not a situation where I am. Anyway, it's my favorite thing to do to go get a workout. So yeah, I mean it's a big part of it to me. And
That's actually such a unique take you have. I don't think I've ever spoken to anyone whose like primary focus of doing jiu-jitsu is to be like exposed to extremely high intensity workouts, especially someone that's like quite good at grappling as well. It's very unique.
well, I mean, at one point when I was coaching before I got into jujitsu, I'd gained some weight, and I've since lost it and am healthier. And yeah, and that perspective is partly based around the fact that what I want to do is I want to do that till I'm an old man. So yeah, and at a certain age, it'll be difficult for me to go out there and compete. Not that I compete all the time right now. I haven't competed since about October, but yeah.
Okay, interesting. And changing track, I'm just wondering, I guess, what was your experience amongst the different kind of types of grappling, whether it was wrestling, jiu-jitsu, judo? How did you find each individual discipline?
So I mentioned judo and that I was interested in doing judo, not that I've really done judo. So I was originally looking at judo just as a way to learn to throw people more because loading people and picking people up to throw them was not a strength of mine, and I as a coach, which I don't coach anymore as far as wrestling, but as a coach, I wanted to be really competent in my direction to athletes. And so if you're telling an athlete, hey, you should do this and this and this, and you've not experienced doing it, and like where you've done it against a resisting opponent of similar size and skill level, I think there's a little bit of a lack of authenticity in the like your problem solving around it, your perspective is different than if, hey man, your athlete that you're coaching has seen you go do exactly what you're telling him to do, or something very near it, and that you just have a great, more expansive way to talk about it from a deeper understanding. Because if you've ever talked to people who have like a really deep understanding of a topic versus someone who has a shallow understanding of the same topic, you will find that the level of insight you can gain from the person with a deeper understanding is more. They can solve your problems faster, and that's what I was looking for. I'm a firm believer that when it comes to being on your feet, having some dangerous throws, I mean throws that make your opponent worried about you picking them up and going feet to back in wrestling, or picking them up and we're gonna land. I'm putting you where we want to in jujitsu, hopefully trying to get past your guard. They make you a lot more dangerous, so that when you start adding the leg attacks, it's you're defending everything. It's kind of the same concept as if you've heard somebody talk about when you're playing guard, you want to have chokes, arm locks, and leg locks from that guarded position you're playing, because it makes it just much more difficult for your opponent to stop what you're doing. And so a diversity of attacks is like always really important to me. And because while you may have like a Jordan Burroughs level double. Jordan Burroughs level double comes with Jordan Burroughs level sweeps and snap downs and a bunch of other things. He was known for his double, but it was all the other follow-ups that made him even more dangerous. And while I'm speaking of an Olympic champion, somebody that's way higher level than myself, um, it's a illustrative that at all levels, you having a diversity of attacks just makes you harder to defend. They're playing rock paper scissors on what they're trying to defend.
Absolutely. I think that's a really great take from you. I am interested, I guess, oftentimes throws or foot sweeps can be considered to be like a tiny bit more obscure, a lower percentage compared to your more conventional attacks, such as, singles, snap downs, etc. So, how do you kind of balance, I guess, like the
I,
fundamentals or the bread and butter versus integrating other approaches
so
or techniques?
for jujitsu, in my personal opinion, there's a pretty bright line in the difference from foot sweeps. So there's a lot of judo style foot sweeps where you put people and they fall straight to their back. And what you got to remember is what the judo rule set is. If you make a person fall flat on their back, Ippon wins the match. Done. It's over. So a judo style foot sweep that puts someone flat on their back is the most highly rewarded thing in all of judo. Okay, so important to remember that because if you foot sweep someone, they fall flat to their back and they pop right back up, and you don't follow them down, you don't get to a pinning position, you don't hold them there for 3 seconds. In jujitsu, that's not worth anything. And so, well, the reason I'm saying this bright line, I'm talking about it, is there's two major different styles of foot sweeps, and I try to prioritize ones where I more often foot sweep and I trade the leg to my hands. And then once I'm grabbing their leg, I've used it instead of a penetration step to get to their legs and to bring them to the ground. That's just like my personal approach. I'm not saying that it's the best approach, like the only approach, nothing like that. But a lot of times when I'm looking for a foot sweep, it's much more like what Steve Mako did, who's made really famous. He's an NCAA champion twice and a runner-up once, and he was known for foot sweep, foot sweep, foot sweep. And occasionally he'd get people all the way to the ground, but most of the time, when he foot sweeped people, he traded the leg up to his hands, and then he finished it in a much more traditional wrestling style. And wrestling and jujitsu share more in the takedown game than either of them share with judo in like the goals around it.
Okay, I think that's a pretty insightful take. And I'm just wondering, kind of switching kind of trains of thoughts a little bit. Having grown up wrestling predominantly, what was your experience like trying jiu-jitsu for the first time? That must have been a bit surreal or a bit surprising, or how was it?
I was really surprised by the jujitsu culture being a little different. So in wrestling, every like one of the big problems with wrestling, in my opinion, is wrestling largely doesn't exist for adults, and even in the United States, you're out of high school or you're out of college, and unless you're going to go try and wrestle at the senior level, which for people who don't know, the senior level is the Olympic level, you're done. You're basically done. So there was no options anymore there. And so when you show up to a jiu-jitsu gym, or sorry, the reason I was talking about everybody being young is there's more competition. Like you have 2 meets a week when you wrestle as a kid. And so that's like 3 to 7 matches, like roughly every week when you're a wrestler, like during the wrestling season. So everyone competes. And then when I showed up in jiu-jitsu, like there weren't a whole lot of competitors. And the fact that the average intensity was lower was a bit of a culture shock. I mean, especially for me, I wrestled at a program that I went to high school with several college wrestlers. One guy who, yeah, I wrestled with several college wrestlers. I wasn't the best wrestler in the room when I was going to school. I'm a guy who just stuck with it because I loved it. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Okay, that's really interesting. 'Cause, for me personally, I started jiu-jitsu and wrestling simultaneously. And I was lucky enough, as I said, wrestling is extremely obscure in Australia, but just by random chance, there was an Iranian wrestler that had just migrated to Australia and was randomly in my small town, and I decided to join. But I had a similar experience too. I remember I used to like dread going to wrestling because of the intensity of the warm-up and that it would be so physically hard and demanding and intense. And then to me, going to jiu-jitsu was almost like fun or like relaxing. And that's not like a slight at jiu-jitsu. I mean, my first jiu-jitsu coach was like extremely focused on kind of physicality intensity anyway, but the overall rumor of the culture in jiu-jitsu was much more relaxed. So
Yeah.
I, I don't know. I loved it in retrospect wrestling, but I can relate to that. It's like wrestling was like a grind, and like I used to be like dreading going, and jiu-jitsu was always fun to me to go to.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't trying to say that like there aren't jujitsu rooms that people have super high intensity because there are, but that was my first experience, and so that's what you were asking about. So that's what I answered.
Yeah, I wasn't implying that
Yeah,
you're
I
making
was
that
just being
implication.
clear.
I was just
Just
yeah
being
saying
clear.
obviously. And so what is it that you think that jiu-jitsu people don't necessarily understand about wrestling and vice versa? Or, like, what are some misconceptions from each sport about the other?
So I think the jujitsu misunderstands about wrestling is, and this is on average. This isn't everybody. How much more wrestlers fight to deny a takedown that is almost won. Um, there's exceptions. I've met guys who never wrestled who absolutely fight every tooth and nail not to give up the takedown. But on average, it's not the same. And I mean not that the takedowns are as important as jujitsu because you could pull guard, but the ability to determine where the match goes is often determined by the person who can take the other guy down, unless the guy who is a worse wrestler immediately pulls guard. But I think there's a lot of value in determining where the match goes. So if you're a better wrestler, you can determine, hey, I want to be on top, or I want to be on bottom, or wherever you want to go. You get to have more say over where the match goes. And so I think that's really important in jiu-jitsu. The misconceptions of what I was talking about, and I got a little off track, was guys who wrestle for wrestling who are good will fight tooth and nail to not give up the takedown. Like it could be like all is almost lost and they're still fighting. And that even makes some sense because of the fact that how much more your position matters out of the takedown in wrestling. Like if you're being taken down and you're being taken down to in jiu-jitsu and you can get to a good guard or something like that, you might even be in the better position than the dude who took you down. If you take somebody down and you're in a good closed guard player's guard, he might be wanting to write you a thank you note, like, "Hey, thanks for the takedown. Yeah, I'm really good at closed guard. Let's go play closed guard now." You know what I mean? So it's kind of hard from that perspective to like critique it, but like that is a misconception I think a lot of jujitsu players have, is like just how hard wrestlers fight not to go down.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I think I may even be. I could even benefit from thinking about that because I really enjoy the wrestling exchange, but correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if this is what you're referring to, but sometimes when someone gets like a definitive position on you, like let's say they've picked up a single and they're pretty much running the pipe on you and you're halfway down. At that point, to be honest, I think being reflective upon my own game, I would at that point almost accept the position and start moving towards a guard rather than continuing to
Yeah,
scramble. Is that
and
what you're saying
that's exactly what I'm
people
saying.
could
That's
benefit
exactly
from?
what I'm saying
Yeah.
because somebody, and I'm not saying I'm gonna do this every time, but like someone starts running the pipe on me, I might start connecting to their lats and pulling them or attacking their hands, even while they're still in trying to run the pipe, working my head position under their head. I might just like if this takedown really matters, like let's say it's near the end of a match, I'm winning by one, like I'm gonna do all of those things to get away from you, and I'm gonna hop, and I mean it, and I'm just that that takedown's not won because you're on a single and you're trying to run the pipe. That's exactly what I'm saying. It's yeah, you can continue to fight that battle. I'm not saying you always should, but I'm saying wrestlers are way more likely to continue to fight that battle.
Okay, interesting. And what is it about kind of people that come from wrestling that may not understand moving to jiu-jitsu or the game of jiu-jitsu?
It's wrestlers misunderstanding jiu-jitsu. So for numerous wrestlers I've talked to that are like still like fully wrestling, their jiu-jitsu is less known to them than wrestling is to jiu-jitsu players. because jujitsu is not part of the sport of wrestling. Wrestling is part of the sport of jujitsu. Like the many of the techniques, I can run almost every folk style technique I want in a jujitsu match. The opposite is not even close to true. So one of the things I think that most wrestlers are incorrect about when they show up to jujitsu, and myself included at one point, was the value of the bottom position. Just plain and simple, getting good at it. Like in like it doesn't have to be ever become your main thing. But if you are not the better wrestler, you still want to win this match. If you are not the better leg locker, you still want to win this match. Regardless of the circumstances, if your opponent's got you beat in the area, I still want to try and win the match. And so if you are a wrestler and your match is against somebody who is a higher level wrestler but lacks the skill in like guard passing, you really might be well suited to go play the bottom game, get good at the bottom game, have a plan A from the bottom game and how to get there. So I think that's the single largest thing that like new jiu-jitsu players who wrestled could really learn is like, hey, we got to have a guard game. Having a guard game is not optional.
And is that because there may be particular matchups or instances where you're able to counter your opponent if, they have a particular game and you have developed a different game? It might be more optimal to
Yeah,
do that.
yeah. I mean, there are. I mean, just look at the sport of jiu-jitsu, and there are specialists in the sport of jiu-jitsu, and I say this like with zero slight. Mateusz Szczęsny is one of my favorite grapplers. Mateusz Szczęsny is going to try and get to your legs. He's incredible at it. He's going to try and get to your legs. If he can get a hold of your left foot, you're probably going to end up with an injured foot. But he doesn't have the dominance of somebody like a Gordon Ryan who would go out there and would out wrestle a significant portion of jiu-jitsu players, like a lot. And he could also go out there in like a match against a person who was a better wrestler than sit guard and heel hook them. And the number of places he could go to win is just higher. So his rate that he won his matches is just higher. If you have a very defined plan A, and someone can go out there and avoid your plan A like the plague, you have a lower percentage chance to win than if I have plan A over here. If I need to wrestle, I have a almost as good or maybe right next to it, like hair difference. Plan A if I have to play bottom, and then if he gets past here, I have this other great part of my game. Like it's just harder to play to win matches against people who are very diverse. And I just dropped my keys.
That's okay. That's a really interesting point. I guess the way that you said that, I mean, to use Gordon Ryan as an example, I think this has never been apparent to me, but you're right in the sense that he's really good everywhere, or he's good at a variety of different games. But
No,
the counter argument
for
or
real.
the devil's advocate,
Yeah.
it's crazy. But the counter argument or the devil's advocate is like, if you are a practitioner, is it better to invest your time in becoming like so good at a particular game or approach that you can beat most people?
Jiu-jitsu is not math, but I'm gonna just look at it a little bit like a math problem and like pretend for a second. If you're doing a multiplication problem and you've got a couple different coefficients, you got like a 7, a 2. Are you better off to make a larger total number at the end by investing more in the higher number or the lower number? And the answer is clearly the lower number because you're increasing your multiple of the higher number faster. Jiu-jitsu is not math. Not trying to say it is, but getting a second part of your game up to that level makes you more dangerous because you cannot simply focus on one specific thing. And so the lack of them to be able to pay attention to something specific, the fact that they have to have more thoughts in their head and they have to carry those around more, it makes you harder to deal with. I'll tell you straight up, there's been a match one time where I tried to lat drop somebody and I slipped in a puddle of sweat and I fell on my back and I went right into K-guard and heel hooked the guy. I won. By all accounts, I was going to win that lat drop. I felt it. He was up in the air and I just go down. And like I watched it on the mat on like on a video like probably 6 times of me just being like and falling. I go to push off and I'm just down on my butt. And not to say that like that's always going to work out like that, but like having those other plans for when you get taken out of your plan A by a puddle on the mat or just someone who's
Hmm.
really good at stopping that, fine. That's it's great to have. It's great to have the diversity of attacks.
Yeah, I think to reframe this discussion in the middle ground, it's almost as if like you can generally approach any given match with your best game.
Yeah.
However, there are going to be instances due to random luck or just how a sequence happens to pan out in which there will
Oh,
be an answer that will be kind of more optimal or just inherently better than forcing a particular
oh yeah.
aspect of your game.
I mean, look
I
at.
mean,
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I agree with you completely. And the example I just used, Matej
yeah.
Szczęsny, when he grappled Joseph Chen the first time, broke his foot, or like he popped his foot and he beat him. Like I don't know if he actually like broke it, but like there was definitely he limped off the mat from what I remember. And then Joseph Chen beat him at ADCC trials the second time. And Joseph's Planet Chen's explicit game plans do not let him get a hold of my left foot. You know what I mean? And so that being the case, well, if they're like if and I mean I'd be surprised if like you know if Matej Szczęsny even disagreed with me. If Matej Szczęsny was like, oh, I can beat you more and more ways. I'm sure he'd love to have a better wrestling game. I'm sure he'd love to have a better top game. Not that he's not good at those. Not at all saying that. He's just like the level of his leg locks is excellent. Like thoroughly excellent. If he everywhere else was at that same level, he'd be incredibly difficult to beat. He's also, to be clear, like one of my absolute favorite grapplers to watch.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting topic you brought up, and I've heard similar from a lot of people that are quite good at grappling. It's like they develop their A game and then they learn like a bunch of contingencies, or
Yeah,
they get really good at like
yeah,
a really low percentage thing happening. And I can relate to this in the sense that initially when I started jiu-jitsu, I think like most people, I really just wanted to win my roles, and so for
yeah.
like maybe like 6 or 12 months, my whole thing was like to get mounted and go for an arm triangle. That's all I did, and I got relatively good at that.
Yeah.
But then it's like you're never always going to get to that position, or you're going to go against people that are better, and it's going to take a more sophisticated or complex game.
Yep.
And it sucks learning stuff because it makes you worse in the short term, right? And it's really difficult to
Yeah.
swallow that pill sometimes. But when you commit to it and you start seeing that you're able to implement other facets of your game and that you're getting better holistically, it's kind
As
of self motivating from that point on.
at one point where
But
during, sorry, I didn't mean to, I thought you were done.
sorry, no, my bad. I just one more point. I was just gonna say like even to the point where like they're really obscure. Like I remember I watched an entire Gordon Ryan body lock passing instructional, and as you know, they go for like 12 hours straight. And the only way that I
I own
ended
that
up
one.
implementing body lock passing, yeah, the only way that I ended up implementing body lock passing was that I never look for it from a specific passing sequence, but there's one sequence that comes from a scramble where you end up with like a tight waist, and whenever I get to that position, I do a body lock pass from there. It happens maybe like once every like 50 rolls, but that just always works for me, and it's led to like an effective pass. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, you may spend like 12 hours learning something, and it may come in handy like 1 out of 100 times or something, but it's still, I guess, making your game better.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't advise anyone to try and watch any instructional straight through, but
Yeah.
yeah, I hear you. Honestly, yeah, that's I hear you. That's interesting. I feel I lost my train of thought. Yeah. Oh, I don't remember what it was. Sorry. Yeah, what you were just describing. For at one point during blue belt for like 6 months, I didn't Kimura anyone, and I'm really good. Like I didn't finish Kimura. I used Kimura like Oti Kimura or other things like that, but like I didn't try to finish Kimura in the because at the time it was my absolute best submission, and so it's one of my best submissions still. But I was trying to develop other submissions more so that I was developing a diversity of attacks. And when you're talking about these contingencies, what I personally like to think of is like your best game is the highway, and you want to build exit and entrance ramps. So, and what I mean by that is, so like things that come off and branch away from your A game are great for learning. And then things that bring you away from other things to your A game are great for learning. So, and that's personally how I try to build out is like, where does this individual technique or position I want to learn, how does it bring me back to that funnel and help build the funnel to bring everyone to my A game and make it bigger and wider and more inclusive of all of jujitsu. And so that's what I'm constantly trying to do when I build positions or work on my jujitsu skills is make the funnel bigger, wider, harder to escape, where I'm funneling people into what I do well.
Absolutely, and I think my approach to kind of learning jiu-jitsu I've tried to be systematic. So I went through like all kind of the general takedowns, and then guards, guard retentions, guard passing, submissions, each position, etc.
Yeah,
And I've always had this like desire in my head to like, I know that I'm never going to be like perfect at jiu-jitsu or
nobody is.
technically learn it all, but I want to get a good understanding of the system. But sometimes I think, I don't know if you can relate to this, but you seem quite analytical in the sense that you would like to compartmentalize things or have a good system. So sometimes
Yeah,
I find it a bit depressing that you can never like completely understand or like complete jiu-jitsu. It's always like open-ended.
that's it, that all things of learning knowledge are open ended. I'm a big person who reads about science regularly. I work in a scientific field. It's life, man. The not everything's knowable. Jujitsu is a whole lot more knowable than like other things you could read about in scientific fields. So I I'm not personally that concerned about that being not completely knowable. And truthfully, like you don't need to know all of it. The best grapplers are often, hey, we have a lot of things we're really good at, but it's not everything they know. But it's the more things you have at the highest level that you are, the better you are, and the better that is. But you don't need to have the best ham sandwich. I mean, I'm just picking on a random submission, but I mean, yeah.
Absolutely. And what, I guess, when you moved into jiu-jitsu, what is it from the wrestling background that helped you succeed early on, and what was it that you kind of had to rethink and learn or modify?
Default early on, number one thing was pure intensity, ability to and willingness to pour gas on a fire when you're trying to lose, when you're losing. Yeah, that's the thing. You don't lose that like of I'm gonna go super hard. Like, and I'm talking about like in a comp. What I'm talking about, I'm gonna go super hard. So like, I think that was the single largest one. Behind that, I'd probably say balance. Just it is so difficult to build like exceptional balance, and wrestlers do that. And it's honestly a big part of it. If you anyone's ever talked about like how hard it is to sweep good wrestlers, we built balance through lots of times people trying to knock us over. And right what I said at the beginning of we will scrap for that. Like we're almost lost. For like good wrestlers will scrap for that position they almost lost. They're almost on the ground. They lost. They've almost been beat. And so like you develop exceptional balance when you're doing that. Not I mean not everyone's is going to be the same, of course, but like yeah, I mean it's as fundamental as that sounds. Having a a willingness to go hard, having strength, exceptional balance. Uh, yeah, that's I would say the single biggest things, and I wouldn't say that like those are bigger than your like singles, doubles, lots of stuff I'm good at from wrestling. I wouldn't say that they're bigger because they are. I would say they're bigger because they are universal to every position you will ever be in. You know what I mean? Um, it doesn't matter what position I'm in. If I'm on, like if my balance is better, you are going to have a harder time moving me. You're going to have a harder time, causing that kazushi, that off balance. It's a huge part of the sport, and being harder to off balance it, it's fantastic. Like
Yeah,
I,
absolutely.
I'd recommend all jiu-jitsu players actively try to work on their balance.
Yeah, I had that experience when I was dropping into a gym in Adelaide just recently. There was an MMA fighter that I was rolling with, and his base was just insane. Like, normally I can try to establish a butterfly guard from bottom and look for off balances, but I just, like, felt like I couldn't get any
Yeah,
connections, and he was like a rock, and he wasn't even particularly, like, physically imposing. He just had insane balance and base, and it really shuts you down in my experience. So I think that's what you're referring to,
Yeah,
basically.
I do. That is, and one of the things I'd actually recommend here that like anyone can use to make their balance better tomorrow, is one of the rules of scrambling that I talk about, like when I'm trying to coach people is look the direction they're trying to take you. You just described butterfly sweeps, and I'm assuming you're trying to do like a variation of like a John Jock sweep where you like have an overhook and then you come over and you pick the leg up and you remove their post because you have their overhook. And it's harder to sweep somebody who immediately looks the direction you're trying to take them because when you look that direction, you immediately hip heist. It's not the looking that fixes it. It's the fact that your hips sink far away that you're harder to roll. So if you start looking the direction that your opponent's trying to take you, it'll be more difficult. But like those are automatic reactions when you grappled longer, when you wrestled longer, when you fought over those positions and you did not concede them. They just happen. And my like observation of them occurred long after I just did them naturally.
Absolutely. And I'm just curious, you talk a lot about kind of bringing intensity and kind of physical resilience into jiu-jitsu. Have you ever found that when you transition to jiu-jitsu, I don't know, people are like put off by like your wrestling intensity or the
Yeah,
difference in
it's
culture?
happened. It's
Because
happened.
sometimes I've had frustrations because as I said, I started wrestling simultaneously. And I mean, sometimes in jiu-jitsu, I'm not talking shit, but people can be like, "Oh, just chill out." Or they want to have like a really like technical, slow-paced run,
It's
and I really love the intensity that wrestling brings.
yeah.
Or sometimes people will be like, "Oh, I'm tired. Like I want to sit this round out," or they'll
It's
like stop halfway through the round, and it's like either pace yourself or like push yourself. I don't get like
I,
gassing yourself out after
I
like
don't know,
30
man.
seconds and then
It depends
stopping.
upon people's like goals. So like if their goal is to be a competitor, then I'm more like inclined to agree with you. If their goal is, yeah, I'm gonna hang out with people and have a community and I'll get some workouts in, then I'm less likely to agree with you. But it varies. And yeah, I mean the off-puttingness of it, yeah, I mean the if you're it took me a while to understand that there was different goals within jiu-jitsu. Like that people were trying to have that just be a community and have it be this fun thing they did sometimes and that's because it was foreign to me for that anyone to not do grappling to go compete. So I mean I don't have any judgment for it. Like so like just to be clear, it's just different things and different expectations from different people, and that's why it's partly important to find the type of gym you want to attend.
Yeah, unfortunately in Australia there'll typically only be one gym, if any, in a given town. But
Yeah,
I guess I'm in the stage that you're in before your enlightenment, where I had an open enough mind to realize that people have different motivations and reasons for training. So I think you're like objectively correct, and that's the fair response. But you're probably familiar with like your own internal feelings about wanting to have hard rolls or people matching your intensity, and
yeah.
it's just
My
sucks sometimes
only
for your own perspective.
my only critique that I find personally really irritating is when people want to go very hard, but they want you to go less hard. Um, so like if someone's bringing full intensity and going as hard as they can possibly go, and what they really want is to win and you to not go so hard, and they would like you to back off, and they also don't use their words at all. I'm like, hey man, I can't go this hard, or hey, this like, can you bring it down a notch? Anything using like a verbal like talk to somebody. That's the only thing I find upsetting is somebody like going as hard as they can, and they may think they're trying to match your intensity, especially while you're trying to bring it down because like there's a skill level gap or a size level gap, and and then they're upset about it and that no words were spoken because like that's something I find I have little patience for. I mean, we're adults should be able to use their words and say, hey, like this is not like this is harder than I want to go, or hey, bring up the intensity, man. You're holding back, and I actually try to be clear with people about that. So
Yeah, I think that's a good point. As you know, I think a lot of people kind of suffer with social skills in jiu-jitsu, but
Life.
I guess one other point I have about this topic is like sometimes I feel like you can be kind of like compromised in your ability to like try your hardest in jiu-jitsu because like especially if you're dropping and you don't want to seem like you're being an asshole or like you're trying too
Dropping
hard.
into a gym, so another thing where people don't know
Yeah.
you. Like
Yes.
bringing intensity to that is a different conversation than, hey man, the people who know you, that like at the gym, like these are my training partners who absolutely want me to bring it, and these are my training partners who, hey, I'm looking for like a leg lock technical roll because there's a size gap but not a skill gap. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And so something like that, that's important. But like in a drop in situation, it's a there's several more layers of people just need to use their words because you don't know each other. The things you learn about each other over time don't don't those things don't exist when you drop in. So like, hey, if you drop in somebody was like, hey, what kind of role are you looking for? And people might look at you cross-eyed, but like, I'd rather someone think I'm a little bit odd for being direct with them than be upset because I wasn't direct with them and they also weren't direct with me, and it's just like that can be a weird situation. So like, fundamental statement here is like, be direct, use your words. Things get better when you do it.
Yeah, I think we could talk about this forever, but yeah, there are many layers of like kind of social paradigms around it, and
Yeah,
it's a complex issue.
I mean,
But yeah.
especially with grappling or fighting sports in general, because nobody wants to be worse at fighting than the other person. Like, and I know grappling isn't like MMA. I know that, but like, it's nobody wants to get held down and choked. So like, and nobody wants to admit that, hey, this dude across from me, whether it's me grappling with somebody who's better than me or me grappling with someone who's worse than me, the guy across from one of you is going to probably likely be able to hold the other down and choke them. And
Yeah.
so, like, unclear situations around that just don't make any sense. And yeah,
Okay. What do you think implementing wrestling effectively into the current jiu-jitsu landscape looks like?
I think you looks like what you see today. I mean, I think we already have. If you go watch an ADCC from 20 years ago, doesn't look like today. American folk style wrestling has had a monstrous impact on jiu-jitsu. And yeah, like it looks like what we see today. I mean, it looks like people like Jason Nolf, who's a three-time NCAA champion, uh, being on UFC BJJ, dude. I think we're here.
You don't think there are any more innovations to occur there, or particular
I don't.
things that will change,
That's
or
not exactly what I'm saying, but I think the vast majority of them are. I think there's a further integration of people who grew up doing both. But like for like revolutionizing or like vastly changing the game, I think a lot of that's already occurred. And maybe it's not occurred locally where you live or and locally in anywhere anyone else specifically lives, but like globally at the highest levels, guys in jujitsu call up senior level athletes or former senior level athletes to teach them wrestling. Guys, like, yeah, it's in there at the highest level of the sport. Now, are these guys focusing on their counter wrestling when they're doing this because they're not capable of attacking similarly skilled opponent in the area of wrestling specifically? Yeah, that's a different story. Which is why I said I think maybe there'll be more coming up when we see the people who grew up doing both come out there and be the elite level, kind of like what happened to MMA, where at one point everyone in MMA, had I have a blank base, and then they built MMA from there. Where you see now there are guys who like started training, and what they started training was I want to fight MMA, and like it, I think you're gonna find that more with jujitsu, where the even the guys who just trained jujitsu grew up in the jujitsu that has wrestling. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And so I hear that you're getting involved in having a gym and starting coaching soon. How are you feeling about that, and what are your thoughts around that?
I'm looking forward to it. Honestly, I've known I want to coach for a long time. I enjoyed coaching wrestling, and I'm looking forward to it. Like it's a little bit like a new experience, but I am looking forward to it. It's hard to really express your emotions sometimes. I'm not great about it. I'm much better at looking at something analytically and being like, yeah, this is exactly what's happening. Like the battle for something is this than I am at looking at like, hey man, what do you think or feel? And that's a work in progress.
Okay, so I mean, what will your approach to coaching be, or
It'll
kind
be
of
a
why is it
very much
important
a
to have a
mix
learning
of
mindset?
ecological approach and direct instruction. And I'm a huge believer that the ecological approach does a lot for newer people to understand the waters they're swimming in, understand the positions they're in, understand their reactions, understand what is natural, and at a point where the progress slows down, it can be sped back up again through the use of direct instruction, where we teach, hey, it's great that you're learning to be creative and solve your own problems here, but like this is a really good solution to the problem. Like you have this problem, this solution works. It's not the way, it's a way, but here is a way. And because of that, we're gonna give you a way. Now, continue using the ecological stuff. It doesn't need to be a game specific around this, but to build out what you're good at, add additional things. All moves ever created were created through like the ecological approach happening. Someone solved a problem, and then they were like, "Dude, look at how I solved this problem." But I'm a believer that you can stand on the shoulders of giants, and once you know where how to stand, you know what I mean. So like that ecological approach helps with learning how to stand, learning where you're at, knowing what the position is, knowing what like real resistance feels like. Because my big problem that I see with like pure direct instruction is people don't keep each other honest always with the direct instruction. Do you know what I mean by that?
Are you basically saying that they may not be forthcoming about the limitations of a
No,
technique
no,
or
that's not even
what
what I
they're
mean. I
teaching in the
mean,
drill?
when you let's say like you go drill something and somebody's like, "Hey, I want to see 10 single legs," and then the dude shoots single leg and he wraps up your leg and you go down, and he didn't fight you at all for that. That's a problem, even when you're drilling. Like that's a problem. That's going through the motions. Like even when you're like practicing a specific technique, the resistance being present is required. Like if you learn it wrong, if you don't resist them. And so like even when you're like teaching a specific solution to a move, like a specific move that's a solution to a problem, you got to keep your opponent, or you're not your opponent, your training partner honest, because your opponent will keep you honest no matter what. That's what he's there to do, But you got to
Mm.
keep your training partner honest. If you tap to a triangle that's not choking the daylights out of you, I mean, it doesn't need to be choking the daylights out of you, but like if you're tapping into a triangle that's not tight, you're giving your partner false positives. They're thinking, "Oh, this works. It works. I'm good at this. I can hit this triangle on people." And if you're not keeping them honest, you're messing them up. Honestly, like you're giving them a
Yeah,
false confidence that they shouldn't have.
absolutely. No, I think that's a fair take. So, I guess wrapping up, is there anything? I'll get you to do a plug momentarily, but is there anything else you wanted to cover or talk about? Or
No, I mean the for people in West Michigan, if you want to come train, the gym I'm gonna be the program I'm gonna be opening. It's not gonna be my gym, but the program I'm gonna be opening is Great Lakes Grappling, Black Tie Great Lakes, which yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
okay, excellent. For anyone listening, Randall's always been an extremely good source of technical information. He's always been very generous with providing his advice and helping, and he has pretty significant accolades in wrestling and jiu-jitsu. So definitely recommend you check it out.
Yeah, thanks.
No worries. Righto. Well, thanks so much for coming on.